Okay, we're on the top of Nun Testament Aleph. Top of Nun Testament Aleph, the last word on the first line. Yeah, we established, at least as far as Ishmael Yishkar question, as to whether there could be nullification by the Gidulin, by the new growths of the original plant when it comes to Shemitah purposes. So that we established we could do because everything is ground-based anyway, even if we didn't say that with respect to other areas. So that we established, but we still haven't really been able to find a good basis for Rabbi Yanai, because Rabbi Yanai was of the opinion, even with respect to an onion of Truma, which is not Shemitah based, and therefore you could say Truma is based on when the crops get gathered together after they're out of the ground. That's when the Chi of Truma sets in. And yet he also held that the growths would nullify the status of the Truma of the original onion, the original bulbous planted in the ground. So we didn't really substantiate his shita. So now we're going to attack him a little bit. So Masi Rami Bachama. So Rami Bachama says, Rabbi Yana, you're not out of the woods yet. You know, we were able to, resuscitate the answer that was given by Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha that when it comes to Shemitah, the growths can nullify the original plant, but we weren't really able to substantiate your view. And we can ask Akasha on your view, really from the previous case that we mentioned regarding the Meiser, but that's from but that was from a Brisa, so we're going to ask even a stronger Akasha from a Mishnah. So Masi Rami Bachama Konam Peres Ailu Alai. We're going to ask Akasha from our Mishnah, as he was asking the other day. When is our Mishnah going to be introduced into the discussion? I think it's going to happen at some point. So we waited until Ozzy came back for that. And so it says in our Mishnah, Konam Peres Ailu Alai. Thank you. Konam Mehain Alpi, Konam Mehain Lipi. Person designates particular fruit and says these fruit are always going to be forbidden to me. So then they're always forbidden. It doesn't matter it's the original fruit or whether it's an exchange for it or whether it's the growths afterwards. However, if the person says that they say regarding a certain species of fruit, dates, figs, whatever, I'm just not going to eat them. So I'm not going to eat them. So that would seem to indicate that it's only the original fruit I'm not going to eat. So so if it's something where the seed degenerates or decomposes in the ground, so then he'd be permitted to eat the growths of whatever grows from the original fruits, or certainly anything which is exchanged for the original fruit. However, if it's the type of produce where the seed does not decompose in the ground, it regenerates, like root vegetables, the onions and the garlic and so forth. So even the gidulin, which themselves presumably grew the beheter, they weren't the original fruit, but nonetheless they're always going to be usher. And we don't say that the new ones are going to nullify the old ones, but we say no. If anything, we're going to treat the new ones as a continuation of the old ones, despite the fact that the isser in question is not an isser that comes from the ground. So Amar Rabbi Abba. So Rabbi Abba says no. The case of Nidarim is different because Shiny Konamos Hawil. Since when a person takes a neder upon themselves, this is not even a truma meiser case; it's just a neder case the person took upon themselves. Since the person could always be matur neder, havalu kedavar sheyesh lo matirin ve'ena batel barov. It's like a davar sheyesh lo matirin, which we said is something which can become permissible in the future. There's no bittul, so because there's no bittul, therefore, it doesn't matter, and that the growths that come afterwards would technically be permissible. It can't be mevatel, the original isser, and since we're talking about a continuation of the original isser, so everything gets swallowed up into the original isser in this particular case, because it's a davar sheyesh lo matirin. But if we're going to say that we're drawing an exception according to Rabbi Yanai, when there's a davar sheyesh lo matirin, so why is he meko in the case of truma? Isn't truma arguably a davar sheyesh lo matirin? Because if I separate truma on my crops and then I say, oh, wait a second, I didn't really realize how valuable these crops are. I'd rather take truma from the less valuable crops. I really intended to do something else. I'm going to go to a chacham. I'm going to go to a bezdin. I'm going to be matzah my neder. It's like what happens sometimes. You have a housewife who takes a challah from her dough, and then the challah falls back into the dough. So she comes to our bezdin and she's matzah neder on the challah that she took, so that her dough won't all become prohibited. So you could be matzah neder when it comes to truma, when it comes to challah. So why don't we consider that to be a davar sheyesh lo matirin as well? Hooray truma. It is possible to be matzah the neder and therefore to undo the truma which has been separated, and nonetheless, you can take out the word baro because it's batel in 100 times its measure, but it does become batel. So what kind of an argument is this to say, oh well, this case is different because there's no bittul, there's no opportunity for nullification altogether, whether I'm talking about gidulin or non-gidulin, because it's davar sheyesh lo matirin. So why does Rabbi Yanai not apply the same principle with respect to the batzal shel truma that he plants in the ground, which he says can be nullified by the gidulin afterwards? Truma, after all, is batel. The Tanan sa'a truma tameya shenafa lepachos mimea chulin tirka. If I had a sa'a, I had one measure of truma, that even if it was truma tameya, it has the possibility of becoming nullified if it fell into less than 100 times its measure. So then it all has to be left to rot because it can't be used because of the fact that it can't be used by Yisrael, and it can't be used by a Kohen either because it's truma tameya. It's not truma tahora. Halameya, but if it would fall into 100 times its measure, despite the fact that the truma that we're talking about is truma tameya, tala, it is going to be nullified. So no, really, in this particular case, we're talking about when we say that truma can be nullified. Truma can only be nullified when it's not a davar sheyesh lo matirin. When it's not a davar sheyesh lo matirin, when it's already been delivered into the hands of the Kohen. Truma biyad Kohen askinan, that since the Kohen was already, says the Ran, since the Kohen was already zocher in this truma, it's not a question of, it has potential to be given before it's actually given over. So then a person can be matir neder. Once it's given over to the Kohen, so then you can't be matir neder anymore because the Kohen already has it in his hands and he can't be matir neder. That's one explanation. Another explanation as to why it is that it can't be batel is because the Yisrael, who's the one who would be shoel on the neder? It's the Yisrael who would be shoel on the neder. Once the Yisrael has given it over and it's no longer in his hands, so therefore he can no longer be matir neder about it, and we assume that the Kohen has no interest in being matir neder. He's happy to have the truma, or alternatively, we could say the Kohen really could be matir neder. But we're talking about the Yisrael, that the Yisrael is the one who, since he gave it over, so he doesn't have the ability to be matir neder anymore. The simple explanation is that you can't be matir neder, even the Kohen can't be matir neder once it goes into his hands, and the Yisrael can't be matir neder because he already gave it away. So in this particular case, it's not a davar sheyesh lo matirin, and that's the reason why it can be batel. Okay, iachi. If that's what we're talking about, but the seifa of this particular Mishnah indicates that it wasn't already in the hands of the Kohen, because it says in tahora, if the truma was tahor, so what do you do if it wasn't tamei and it fell into less than 100 times its measure? So then timakir the Kohen, then you could sell it to a Kohen. So why then, if it's still in the hands of the Yisrael, and in fact, he has the ability to be matir neder on the truma, why don't we consider it, according to Rabbi Yanai's reasoning, to be a davar sheyesh lo matirin? So we have to explain because it already was given to a Kohen. This was truma that was given to a Kohen, and now it passed on an inheritance to his grandson, who happens to be a Yisrael, because it went through his daughter. He didn't have any sons, presumably. The daughter inherited it and passed it down to the grandson, who because the daughter married a Kohen. And the grandson is a. I'm sorry. We went to the daughter married a Yisrael, and now it went to the grandson who's a Yisrael, and he's not going to be able to eat it himself, but he can give it to a Kohen and sell it to a Kohen. but because of the fact that the truma already vested, so he can no longer be shoel on the truma. To reverse it, it stayed from being truma. El bisal shenafalom based abi imo kohen askinan. The haketani seifa, but then the seifa says that when he sells it, if it fell, the truma, the measure of truma fell into less than 100 measures of truma, and therefore it still has the status of truma. If it's tahor, he could sell it to a kohen. It says that when he sells it to a kohen, he can't charge for the actual measure of truma that's mixed in because the kohen was entitled to that anyway. And if in fact the Yisrael who has the truma had full ownership of the truma, then he can even sell that to measure of truma because he owns it. So he would be able to sell that measure. So we must be talking about where it did not vest. And nonetheless, we say that it's not considered, and it's still, he has the ability, the Yisrael, before he gives it over to a kohen, has the ability to be a matir neder with respect to the truma, and yet we don't consider it to be a davar sheyesh lo matir, and it can be batel. Elaima, rather, we have to explain, no, the nedarim are different. Nedarim are always considered to be a davar sheyesh lo matir because it's a mitzvah to be matir your neder. We don't want you to be walking around with nedarim. However, truma, we want you to be mafish truma, so therefore it's not considered to be a desideratum for a person to be matir their neder. That's the distinction. And that's why truma is not considered to be a davar sheyesh lo matim. Bishlama like this, konamas is a mitzvah l'chulei aleim. It's a mitzvah to be matir neder with respect to your nedarim, as we know from the principle of Rabbi Nosson. Call it the Rabbi Nosson principle. Mishum the Rabbi Nosson principle against taking nedarim. Mishum the Rabbi Nosson. So Rabbi Nosson said, "Kol nodek ilu bana bama." That if you make a neder, it's like you're creating a separate mizbeach outside of the mizbeach in the base of mikdash, that you're creating your own altar, and that you're adding mitzvahs, you're creating your own religion. Kilu bana bama. And if you decide that you're going to keep your neder and not nullify the neder, like we give you the opportunity to do so, kilu makri baleh. And it's as if you have brought a foreign sacrifice on a foreign altar that you weren't authorized to build or to bring. So therefore, it's a mitzvah that we want you to be matir neder. However, when it comes to truma, there's no such thing. About truma, my mitzvah lichulei Allah. There's no mitzvah. We don't. It's not desired by us that you'll be matir neder. Therefore, truma is not considered to be a davar sheyesh lo matir, and that's why it's batel. Now, Gufam Rabbi Yochanan had said, if I have a litra of B'tzalim Shetikna Bizarre, this was one of the proofs that we tried to bring originally for the Shita of Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, that Gidulin, the aftergrowths, have the ability to nullify the original product. And we said, oh, maybe it's not a good proof because it's only the Chumrah, but at the end of the day, we're really subscribing to this basic Shita, that the growths of what I plant into the ground can nullify the original plants. And now let's revisit that. So what did Rabbi Yochanan say? He said, litra b'tzalim, I have like a pound of onions. Shetikna, I took the trumus from these onions, Mizara, and then I planted them in the ground. I say that the new plants, that the new growths, since they became so abundant that they overwhelmed the original produce. So now it's considered like they're all like the new produce, and even the original plant has to have trumos and taken from it. Mr. Seres the Pikula. So Yosef Rabba sat down. And he was this. We changed the gears here to Rabba. Okay, Yosef Rabba, and he mentioned, and he said that this teaching. He said over this teaching. So Amalei Rav Chisda said, "What is this? What kind of business is this? Man says Rabbi Yochanan Rabach. Nobody's going to listen to you. What's Rabbi Yochanan, whom you're quoting for that matter? It doesn't make any sense. Why doesn't it make any sense? Because we're not talking about Isser. Like I understand." I have something which is also, I overwhelm it with heter, so the heter can be mevatel the yisur. I get that. However, something had already received trumos and maisos were taken from it. I have something which was heter, so I don't overwhelm heter. I don't nullify heter. Heter shebehen leichan holo. How can I combine this produce that already had trumos and maisos taken from it and say that it's on the same status, the same plane as all this other produce that didn't have Trumas was taken from it. So Amalei, so this was a kasha the Rav Chisda posed to Rava, and Rava was not so easily deterred. He said, no, there is such a principle that we can overwhelm something even if it's heter. Milo Tanan the Kavase, we have a Mishnah that says similarly. This is the Mishnah that we also quoted. This Mishnah has to do with other onions, a lot of onions on these pages. Bitzolim, shiardu, because it's the classic, davar, she'ein zaro kalas, your classic root vegetable, right? Bitzolim, shiardu aleim geshamim. If I had bitzolim that belonged to the 6th year, remember we were talking about 6th-year produce, right. And the rain fell on them during the 7th year as they're sitting in the ground. And the question is, and now they're growing more. Did they grow as a result of the ground of the Shemitah year? So now they have to be treated as Shemitah produce, or do they not grow as a result of the ground? We said we have to look at the color of the leaves. If they're black, so then they grew as a result of the ground. And we say that if the growths are greater than the original onions, so then the whole thing is treated as Shemitah produce, right? So you could say, oh, heter shebehen lehechen holcha, right? It's Samchu, so the grain fell, but Simchu, turn the page, okay, Yaakov, we're now on Nun Tes Amud Beis, the very top of the page, okay? And you could say that if we would be learning Ran, we'd be in trouble, but fortunately we only do the Gemara, it's not so bad. So if the leaves were black, so then Asurin, then we assume that the new growth came as a result of the karka of the Shemitah year. Horiku, however, if they are pale, so then we say that no, it didn't. The new growth came came about as a result of the original onions and not as a result of the ground. Horiku would be mutarin. So wait a second. So why do they all become asa now? I have to treat them all with the kedusha of the Shemitah year. Even the original bulb that I planted into the ground, the original bulbs have to be eaten before the Shasa Bia, have to be eaten according to the Kedusha Shvius. You could say, could ask the same question. So we see that we don't apply this principle of Heter Shemen Leichan Halach, even if it's Heter that's being overwhelmed by Yisr, so the Heter also goes away. So Amalei, Mi Savaras Al Ikar Kitani. So said Chista, no, but it's not really on the Ikar that we say that it's not the heter that's really being overwhelmed over here. When we say that you have to treat it with the sanctity of the Shemitah year, what it means is that the new growths have to be treated with the sanctity of the Shemitah year, not the old growths. It just means the new growths are treated with the sanctity of the Shemitah year in such a case that the leaves of the new growths are black. But then what does Rabbi Shimon Gamliel come to add? Because we have a brayso that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel seems to say, that's what he seems to say, which would indicate that the Tanna Kama was not saying that. The Tanya, because we have the brayso that says, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer, he says, no, that only that which grew during the Shemitah year is treated with Shemitah sanctity. Agada b'chiyuv chayav, agada b'pater pater, but whatever grew beforehand during the 6th year is pater from the sanctity of the Shemitah year. So according to the way that we're now teaching the Tanna Kama Nami Yachli Amar, he said exactly the same thing. So he said, no, that's really, you can say that this entire brayso is going only according to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. The Tanna Kama is Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. And now we're finding out the identity of the Tanna Kama and also getting a better sense of what he had in mind. Kula masnisin Rabbi Shimon Gamliel kitani lo. The adkan lo shama slave. Okay, and therefore that's it's all Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Nonetheless, it's not really a kasha. Why is it not a kasha? Rabbi Shimon Gamliel only says that I differentiate between the new growth and the old growth in this particular case, where the lo katarach, where the onion is just sitting there on the ground, and nobody really made an effort to nullify the original growth. The onion's sitting on the ground, and now it grows some more during the Shemitah year. So I take a look. And I say, oh, okay, the new growths are going to be treated with Shemitah sanctity, and the old growths remain mutter the way that they were originally. But in this case, aval heicha the katarach, but where the person actually makes an effort of taking a botzel of truma and planting it in the ground, and having in mind that the new growths are going to nullify the old growths, so then it's perfectly possible that even something which was previously mutter, I had produce where the trumos and maestros have been taken out of it, but now I deliberately planted it in the ground, so it's going to have new growths, and it's going to be like sort of a new entity. So in this case, it's perfectly possible to say that not only do I treat the new growths as something that requires trumos and maestros taken from it, but even the old growths, the heter will go away, and I will require trumos and maestros to be taken from it. Oh, that's what you want to say.
You want to say the katarach, that the thing which was originally mutter can now become a bottle barov, and now it's what had previously been exempt from trumas and maisos is going to be chayav bottle baruba vare litra meiser tevel. What about the case of the litra meiser tevel? That was the last case that we spoke about yesterday. The litra meiser tevel that was planted in the ground, and now another 10 litrin grew from this from this produce. So we say that it's all going, even though it was this was from the 6th year. The litra meiser was tevel from the 6th year, and now I have growths that are coming out of during the 7th year. I say that this meiser still requires the trumas meiser to be taken from it. It doesn't become overwhelmed. It doesn't become nullified. But here, if the person was tareach, he planted in the ground. So really, it should become nullified according to this argumentation that we're saying right now. So why then, in that case, do we say the katarach? The person was tareach. He was deliberately planted in the ground, and now I have shemitah growth. Uketani, and despite the fact that during the shemitah year there's no chiyuv of trumas and maisers, we say that the trumas meiser that was originally obligated to be taken is still obligated to be taken. Remember, that was what we said yesterday. We also litra meiser, we said that you have to take from a different location. You can't take from the same mixture now that I have but let's say it was an onion of this onion together with the other onions, because I don't know what corresponds to the Shemitah year or corresponds to the previous year. So I'd be worried I'd be taking it up for Tzur ala Chayev, but L'maisa, the original litra is still going to be Chayev with respect to the Trumas Meiser. So we say, no, Meiser is a different story, and now we have a confusing line of Gemara. The confusing line of Gemara goes like this. Shiny Gabi Meiser is different to Amakra, because the pasuk says, "Aser te aser es kol tuas zarecha." That you have to take the meiser sometimes not just once, but even twice if it comes from your own. If it comes from your own crops or something which is of your own, so then you have to take it again. What does that mean? That let's say that I had planted crops that were ready at trumas and meisos that taken from it, and now I planted again in the ground. And I have more gidulin. I have a greater amount of new growths that are going to be chayav and chumos and meisos that overwhelm the original one. So now I say, so the whole thing is going to be chayav and chumo meiser again, because of the fact because it doesn't matter, since I planted, it's my own growth. I replanted into the ground. That's aser to aser. Another time, it's called Tvuasarecha, Miss my zera that I planted again. So I chose to plant it again, and now it's been nullified by the new growth. So I'm going to have to take new trumas and meisos. But that's only if it's heter, meaning I had already taken trumas and meisos. But in this particular case of the meiser, the litra meiser, so it was not really proper for me to plant again in the ground because I had not yet taken the trumas meiser. It was meiser, but didn't have the trumas meiser taken from it. So therefore, it's not considered to be zaracha. Since it's not zaracha, so therefore it does not get nullified by the new growths, and it retains its original identity. So that's the idea. That Torah Zari and she, that a person, when we are going to apply this principle of aser to aser of nullification, that's only with respect to zaracha. That's the ace called zarachuas. That's only if it's a heter that belongs to you. But Isura, you had no right to plant it because there was too much spice that still needed to be taken. Lozari and she, and therefore it does not get overwhelmed. So the original chiyuv doesn't go away. You have to add like extra words for this explanation. The Ran says something very, very nice at the end of this. So you shouldn't feel so bad about how confusing the sugya is. The Ran says about the 15 lines down, the last two words of the line with a bold face, if you have the bold. However, this whole explanation is really convoluted. I gotta find myself a Rebbe. Even the writer has to find himself a Rebbe. Don't feel so bad. Okay, next. Guva, Amar Rabbi Chanina Tersa. So we had originally cited the Shita of Rabbi Yanai, who held that even in the case of the Truma, the Batzel Shel Truma, it could be nullified by the new growths, right? So Guva, Amar Rabbi Chanina Tersa, Amar Rabbi Yanai, Batzel Shel Truma, if I had this onion of Truma Shinato, Gidula Balikaro, and now the growths are more abundant. than the original amount that I had planted in the ground. So now, despite the fact that it was truma, I say it's mutter. Mutter, meaning the Torah's tevel, it's mutter, that I be allowed to eat from it like the derech arai in sort of an occasional happenstance sort of way until such time as it becomes a chayav of the truma samaisos until the time of miruach, right? The mema, the mema, the gidulei hetem malin is the iser. So Rabbi Yanai seems to say that the Gidulin themselves are considered to be heter, right? Because they weren't chayav in truma beforehand. They did not reach the shas miruach where it was all piled up, so it never became chayav in truma. And now the Gidulim are treated like regular tevel that you can eat on an occasional basis. And we say the same thing would be true of the original bowl. The Hatanan, but don't we have a Mishnah that says Gidulei truma truma, that the Gidulei truma themselves are considered to be truma. So if I planted a batzel that was a batzel shel truma into the ground, so then the Gidulin themselves should have the status of truma and should not be considered to be heter. Then now it's going to be able to nullify the truma, right? The batzel already actually was taken as truma. It shouldn't be able to nullify the truma because it itself is considered to be truma. So therefore, says the Gemara, no. Really, when we speak about the Gidulin, we're talking about the growth of the growth. The onion that was planted in the ground was not an onion of truma. It was an aftergrowth of an original onion of truma that was treated as truma. And now the growth from that onion is considered to be a secondary growth. It's Gidulei Gidulin. Only the Gidulei Gidulin can overwhelm or nullify the original onion, or in this case, the growths of the onion. The Gidulei Gidulin Kamrinan, Hanami Tanina. So we say, well, I don't need Rabbi Yanai to teach me that because I know that Gidulei Gidulin Achulin. So we say, no, Hakamash Malan, the Chiddush of Rabbi Yanai is that the Gidulei Gidulin are going to be treated as chulin, are going to be treated as non-truma, even with respect to an item where the seed does not decompose, even an onion, which is a root vegetable, because he's talking about a batzel shel truma. He's talking about an onion of truma. Afilu b'davar she'ein zaro kal. Behatanan, but we're not out of the woods yet.
Amen.
Behatanan, hatevel gidulav mutarin b'davar she'zaro kalam. When is it that the gidulav become mutter? That's only with respect to the type of produce where the seed eventually decomposes in the ground. But if I am talking about a root vegetable like an onion, about davar she'ein zaro kala, so then not only are the gidulin considered to be asur, but even the gidulin are asurin. Even the secondary gidulin are asurin. So how can it possibly nullify the original one? So we say no. That's only when the gidulin are basically just the same amount as the original produce. Ribuya deraba gidulin alikaro mutter kamash balam. But when I have a ribuya deraba gidulin alikaro, where the new gidulin, or in this case the gidulin, are going to be more abundant than the original onion or the original gidulin of the onion that was truma that I planted in the ground. So the chiddush of Rabbi Yanai is when it's more abundant, so then it does nullify the original growth. When is it that it doesn't nullify the original growth? When it's not more abundant in amount. Stop. Okay, very good. So Sunday, Hashem, 7 a.m.
When is they started to grow? Speaker?